Project 4, Task 2, develop session plans for vocational training. So this is again part of that building block. This is the last document that you will create prior to conducting those 3 30-minute sessions that you're required to undertake with a group. There are also 2 30-minute sessions that need to be planned and undertaken for individuals. And I'll talk to you about that in a minute because there's some separate instructions that I have on that one. So you're actually required to continue your planning and develop a session plan. Now, a session plan is a document that you as the trainer will follow while you're training the particular group. A session plan should guide you through the topics. It should be something that you refer to if at any point in time you get lost or distracted or get thrown a curveball by your learners, which can sometimes happen. Your session plan is your roadmap. It's the thing that gets you from the start to the finish in the time frame that has been set, and also by achieving those objectives. So we need to think about what goes into that session to fill up the 30 minutes, so to ensure that we're meeting the learning outcomes as well. We don't want the learning outcomes too big, that we're going too fast and the learner's getting lost. But we don't want it too small so that it feels like it's just been dragged out to the 30 minutes. There's a fine art in getting these session plans right, and it's one of the hardest things you could do. As trainers, we tend to tweak our session plans all the time. We tweak our objectives, we tweak where we can, we tweak our activities depending upon what the learner groups are like and how they're progressing through the topics as well. So it is something that is open for adjustment as we go, but in this instance, what we want you to do is to create a session plan, test it and trial it a few times, and then run with it. That sounds nice and easy, doesn't it? All right, you're required to continue planning for the upcoming sessions that you will deliver. This planning will require you to build on the delivery plans that you created in the previous task. In this case, as I said, you're developing a detailed session plan, but we don't want it to be so detailed that it becomes a script. That's not what a session plan is, because as soon as your stress levels go up, you'll revert to reading from it. So we don't want it to be a script, but we want it to also be a transparent document that another trainer could follow if need be, because these session plans are how we get consistency in our organisations when we've got different people training different people. And we've got to remember that if, let's say, for instance, you train somebody today and one of your colleagues trains someone tomorrow and they do it differently, you don't follow a session plan because maybe one doesn't exist. What's going to happen when those two workers come together? Is there a risk that they'll say, well, that's not the way I was taught? Or maybe they actually go, hey, it's really good that we're in sync, we're in alignment because we've both been taught the same. This is what gives people confidence in the training department. So it's important that our session plans are in place and are being followed in a consistent manner with each of the trainers who might be using them. So it's good practice when you're writing a session plan to write it as if you're not following it, but somebody else is. That's a little bit of a trick. All right, so what goes into a session plan? Well, all of the information that you need to keep you on track, okay? So a session plan should include the following: a topic, nice clear topic, clear links between the 3 sessions. So it might even be that there's a little bit of today we're going to do this and tomorrow we're going to cover on that and the next day we're going to build on that, and talking about how each of those topics are linked. The date for the delivery and duration, the group size, any workplace health and safety considerations, so any kind of safety briefing that you might need to undertake, the learning outcome, covering off on both knowledge aspects and performance aspects. What do they need to know? What do they need to do? It should show logical sequencing of the content so that way it's easy for everybody to follow. The hard part here is what I call logical and what you might call logical could be 2 different things. But so long as there is some clear sequencing where one topic segues into another and leads to building on what was previously talked about. the raw resources that are going to be used and the timing around that, the learning activities. There should be a nice logical introduction, body and conclusion. And again, we've provided you with a template here that has that structure. And then your view and review and monitoring progress. So in other words, how are we going to, at the end, wrap it up? How are we going to encourage them to practice what they've learnt and give you feedback on how the session has actually gone? Now, just before we go any further, let's just pop back up to this instruction. So now that we know what a session plan needs to have, let's explain what's needed for these session plans. So you'll see that you need to plan and then present 3 30-minute session plans that will be presented to a group of 4 people, face-to-face and in person. And then 2 30-minute sessions to be presented to individuals, again, face-to-face and in person. And can't be the same people you presented to in the group. So it's got to be different people. Now, if you've already completed, submitted, and been signed off for TAEDEL411 as part of the Foresights Training TAE program, then you will only need to provide evidence for the 3 30-minute group sessions, because the 2 30-minute sessions that you undertook as part of TAEDEL411 can actually be used as evidence here. So just to recap on that, if you have completed, submitted, and been signed off for, so there's 3 critical parts there, for TAEDEL411, which you undertook earlier in our TAE program, then you will only need to submit evidence here for the 3 30-minute group-based sessions. The 2 30-minute sessions you actually did as part of TAEDEL411. Now, if you haven't done it as part of our program here, then you will need to complete those 2 30-minute sessions, both in preparation and also delivering those sessions as well. All right, so let's go through and have a look at the session plan. You'll notice that we also encourage you to consider using some facilitation techniques, so that way you're encouraged to show interaction. This shouldn't be a dry, boring, stand in front of a group and tell them a whole bunch of information in 30 minutes. There should be interaction, there should be engagement, there should be activities that build on achieving the learning outcome. And by the way, as a trainer, this takes the pressure off you. Getting them to do something during the sessions actually fills the time, and it means they're engaged as part of those active learning principles that are important in adult learning. So just think for a second, if you got them to do a group activity in that 30 minutes, that might chew up 5 minutes of your time. Maybe you might get them to do an icebreaker. That might chew up another 3 to 5 minutes of your time. You might get them to do a brainstorming task with some butcher paper. That might also take up another 3 to 5 minutes of your time. There could be role plays, there could be coaching, there could be some breakout rooms if you might happen to be in Zoom, but you've got to remember, you've got to deliver this face-to-face, in person, to a minimum of 4 people. So you can see here, by using some of these facilitation techniques, you can easily take up at least half of that time with engagement activities that build on the knowledge that you're introducing them to. And a good trainer actually involves the learners in the learning process. It's not about lecturing. For you to be deemed competent in this unit, when you do deliver those sessions, You are being assessed on your communication styles, the engagement and the interaction that you have with your learners. So put some activities in there that force that to occur. All right, so you need to make sure that you have completed this session plan before you conduct your assessment in Project 4, Task 3. Just remember that. This session plan must be submitted before you conduct your session. Simple reason is some of the national criteria that your assessor is signing you off against is how you followed your session plan. So we need to see your session plan while you're delivering. You'll notice that there is also a template here for you to fill in, which will be useful in developing that session plan. And again, if you've done TAEDEL411 with us earlier in the program, you'll be familiar with the session plan layout. So let's have a look at that. So you'll notice in your assessment here, there are a total of 5 session plans. Session plan group 1, session plan group 2, session plan group 3, session plan individual 1, and session plan individual 2. And that's to cover off on those 5 sessions that you have to deliver. Remember, the 2 individual ones you may be exempt for. And if you're not sure, contact Foresight's Training, contact our student support team, or talk to your trainer assessor. They'll soon tell you. So your session plan should include a session title, trainer name, session date and time, duration. Don't forget it must be a minimum of 30 minutes. But we don't want it going too far over that 30 minutes because we've got to also assess that as well, and it'll take up other people's time. Your group size, the location where it's occurring. Remember, it must be face-to-face in person. The learning objectives, what the training roles and responsibilities are, the consultation that you've undertaken, contextualisation. Contextualisation means how are we making this real for the learner? Are we using their policies and procedures? Are we using their systems? Are we using their terminology? Are we using their equipment? That's where we talk about contextualisation, I should say. Then we look at work health and safety considerations and around hazards, our resources, how we've planned them, how they meet adult learning principles, and how you organise to ensure that they were in good working condition for your session prior to the session. We then look at your support material, things like policies and procedures, handouts, PowerPoints, those sorts of things. And again, your workplace policies and procedures, which you filled in earlier, so you can copy and paste that over. There's a few questions here about how you monitor activities post the training, like were they effective? If you got them to do a group-based activity, did everybody get involved? Did it work? Did it take up too much time? Was it finished too quickly? You know, they're the kinds of things that we're looking at in that review. And maintaining and storing learner records. This way you need to tell us what the process is for your learner records. Where do they go? Who stores them? Who's responsible for them? What documents do you actually have to maintain and hand in to somebody else if you're not updating the learner records yourself? And who has approved this learning plan as a whole? I'm just going to go through this template a little bit quickly because I am going to show another video in a minute, or this will lead into another video, of a filled in session plan that just gives you a nice example of what one could look like. So again, our session plans start with the intros. These prompters that are on the activities column, this is where you must put a few little bullet points there that help guide you on what you're going to say and what you're going to present. Don't forget, this is a session plan that another trainer should be able to follow. So the information that you put in here is important. If you submit this assessment with just those headings and nothing filled in, it will be a resubmit. We need to see how you've developed this session plan. We've given you the bare bones. You need to then flesh it out with what information you're going to put behind each of those topics. We also need to make sure that your timing in the first column is filled in and also the resources in the last column. Number one reason why people get resubmits is they actually haven't put bullet points after each of these areas in the activities column, or they haven't filled in the timing or the resources that are required in the session plan. We need to see that it's fully planned. So in the introduction, we go through the interest, the need, what is the need for this training or learning that's occurring, the timing, so overall, how much time is this going to take? Is there any homework or any things that we need to consider with regards to timing? It is only a 30-minute session, so I don't expect too much to go in here. The roadmap, what's actually going to happen in the next 30 minutes? So you're going to cover some theory? Are you going to show them a video? Are you going to get them to do a group activity? And then are you going to do a quiz at the end? Like, what's actually going to happen in that 30 minutes? And again, it doesn't have to be in a lot of detail, but it does have to show that you have a plan. Your learning outcome, remember your learning outcome should include both knowledge and performance. So at the end of this training session, you will understand how to do X, Y, and Z and how to perform X, Y, and Z. And finally, your safety check. Then we move into the body of your session, where we get into explaining what the topic's about, undertaking some learning activities. Is there any kind of practice that needs to occur? Are you going to show or demonstrate something? And if you're not, then that guided practice you might take out, or you might replace with maybe another learning activity, which is then practicing what you've explained previously. The recap is a nice little summary again, and then checking readiness might lead into a quiz. So are you ready to test what we've just learned? And finally, our conclusion wraps up with the OFF acronym, Outcome, Feedback, Future. So outcome, we revisit the learning outcomes that were stated earlier in the intros, and then we ask for feedback and we give them some feedback. And in the future, we talk about what we want to see them doing back in the workplace, what they need to practice or what they need to do differently in the workplace as a result of the learning. So hopefully that session plan overview has given you a bit of an idea of what we're looking for there. I'm just going to show you now an example of a completed session plan, just so you get a feel for what they could look like. So here is a completed session plan that is actually in your learner guide. So let's go through it. There's a bit of a cover sheet there which talks about it being a 30-minute session. It's going to occur in the training room. We've also got a session outcome, so a learning outcome. And the session title here is about writing learning outcomes. So the session outcome again starts with that by the end of this session, learners should be able to write a smart learning outcome for a session they will deliver later in the program. I personally don't like using the word should because it sort of basically tells the learners, I'm not real sure if you can do this, which can show a lack of confidence both in what you as a trainer have for them and maybe even a lack of confidence in yourself. I personally prefer to use the words, by the end of this session, you will be able to, because it's a nice positive affirmation. The equipment and the preparation setup is there. You'll then see that the timing and the resources have come into play with this particular session. So the introduction is going to be 5 minutes. So 1 minute, we're going to talk about the interest. In 2 minutes, we're going to talk about why it's important and its relevance. And you can see here, there's already interaction happening with the learners. This particular session plan says for the trainer to ask the group why a learning outcome is important. Let's get a bit of feedback from my group. And if they can answer that, that's great. Let's give credit where credit's due. But if it's not, here's what the answer is that we're looking for. So another trainer could very easily follow this session plan. And again, another question. So you can see in this session, 3 minutes in, there's interaction already happening. It talks about then the timing and how they're going to go through the timing and the roadmap. So this is sharing the agenda of the session. So we're going to go through what is a learning outcome, already actually done that, characteristics, 3 components, practice, and then we're going to give them a little bit of a homework task where they've got to practice. The learning outcome, we're going to explain that, and safety, well, it's not needed perhaps for this particular session. Mind you, for yours, it will be needed because you are doing face-to-face in person. So please make sure you put a safety briefing in your 30-minute session, and what that safety briefing should include will be different depending upon one workplace to another. All right, so that's our 5-minute intro. Not bad. We've already got engagement happening there. Then we move into the body. And the body in this instance goes through and explaining what a learning outcome is. There's 1 minute allocated to that. And the resource is what page number in the workbook will need to be followed. You can see then 4 minutes is broken up with showing a slide or a PowerPoint on what the SMART acronyms mean and how to write a learning outcome according to the SMART acronyms. Getting an idea from the group and then explaining it. And then the 3 components of a well-written learning outcome. And again, the reference to the workbook is there. There are some good questions there that are being asked. And then we've got an activity, construct a learning outcome together. So this is where it's trainer-led, the entire learner group are going to work together on this. It's going to be done on the whiteboard. We're going to write the headings, performance, standard and conditions. And from there, the person is, or the group are actually going to tell us what to write. So we're actually talking about juggling. So if we go back up here, the performance was to juggle. The standard, so we're going to get them to write some standards. And the standards they've come up with are for 1 minute without dropping and juggle 3 things. So you've got time, quality and quantity. And the conditions that they've come up with is that it might be in the training room, using tennis balls or a flaming stick, whatever the case may be. So those 3 headings, that's guided really nicely. You can really pick this session plan up and anybody could follow it. And when we're marking your session plans, that's exactly what we're looking for. Would I be able to follow your session plan if I had to? And we move into reminding the learners, getting them to come up with an individual learning outcome. So again, we've done it in groups, we've guided them, now off you go, you're on your own. Summarising and then assessing them. So write a learning outcome for the session you'll deliver tomorrow, looking for SMART characteristics. So we've given them a little bit of a homework task there. And then we've got our conclusion, which is again 1 minute. So if we go through and add it up, we've got a conclusion that's 1 minute. Our body is 24 minutes and our intro is 5 minutes. There's your 30-minute session. So I hope that's helped showing you an example of a really good session plan. And just remember, you're writing it as if somebody else had to follow it. That's the key. And that's what we're looking at when we're marking it. Would I be able to follow your session plan? If it just says things like group activity, but it doesn't say how many groups, how many people, and what they're doing in that group, then I'm not going to be able to follow it. Please make sure that the timing's in the first column and that your resources are detailed in that last column. And we look forward to receiving your session plans.